Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. Have you ever felt like, you know, it's hard to see things clearly these days?
Oh, yeah.
It's like we're bombarded with information and opinions, and it's tough to sift through it all
Totally agree with that.
and figure out what's actually true.
Yeah.
So we're diving into some work from an expert on clear thinking, and I think you'll find this really, really fascinating.
I think so too.
So to set the stage, this expert argues that our perceptions,
Right.
they're shaped by three main things, and those are
Okay.
one, our own biases, two,
Yeah.
our emotional state, and then three,
Makes sense.
the information that we choose to consume, like what we're reading, what we're watching, all of that.
Yeah, so it's not just about what's happening out there in the world. It's also about what's going on inside our own heads.
Exactly like the filter that we're looking at the world through.
Right.
So this expert talks about mindfulness as a really powerful tool
Yeah.
for understanding those internal processes. And I'll admit, when I first heard about mindfulness, I was like, oh, this is kind of like a woo-woo thing.
I know a lot of people feel that way.
Like sitting on a mountaintop.
Yeah. Yeah,
But this expert, they present it in a really practical way.
they do.
So how do they define mindfulness?
Well, they describe it as the ability to observe your thoughts and emotions without judgment.
Okay.
It's about noticing the stories your mind is creating, the assumptions it makes, the way it jumps to conclusions, all of that.
Yeah, that reminds me, in your notes, you highlighted a section about confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what we're talking about here?
Absolutely. Confirmation bias is a classic example of how our minds can, distort reality.
Okay.
We tend to seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs.
Right.
Even if that information is, flawed or incomplete.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, we often dismiss or downplay information that challenges our views.
It's like our brains are trying to, protect us, even if it means
Yeah.
ignoring the truth.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
wants to be right. Yeah.
And it's not just confirmation bias. You know?
Right.
There are all sorts of cognitive biases that can kind of trip us up. And you mentioned earlier feeling overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information out there.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's something called information overload.
Okay.
And it can lead to something called availability bias.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that one, so
Yeah.
break that down for me.
So availability bias is the tendency to overestimate the likelihood of events that are easily recalled.
Okay.
So, because we're constantly bombarded with news about crime and terrorism and all sorts of negative events,
Right.
we might start to believe that the world is a much more dangerous place than it actually is.
So it's not that those things aren't happening,
Right.
but our perception of their frequency is
Yeah.
skewed because they're so readily available.
Exactly. And this is where mindfulness comes in,
Okay.
By becoming more aware of our thoughts and feelings, we can start to identify these biases and question them. So it's not about eliminating biases altogether.
Right.
It's more about recognizing when they're influencing our thinking.
Precisely. And that awareness is the first step towards seeing things more clearly.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about how our biases and our emotions, they can really color our judgment.
They really can.
But what about the information we're taking in?
Right.
That has to play a huge role, right?
Absolutely. This expert talks about the dangers of what they call echo chambers,
Okay.
where we surround ourselves with information that only reinforces what we already believe.
Yeah.
And you mentioned in your notes about feeling stuck in a filter bubble online.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's like all I see on social media are articles and opinions that already align with my own views.
Right.
It's comfortable, you know,
It is comfortable.
but it's probably not giving me the full picture.
Exactly. And that's a really common experience these days.
Yeah.
The algorithms that power these platforms, they're designed to show us content that we're likely to engage with.
Which often means content that just confirms our existing biases.
So it's like a self-perpetuating cycle.
It is.
So how do we break out of these echo chambers?
Well, this expert, they talk about the importance of seeking out diverse perspectives.
Okay, so actively looking for viewpoints that challenge our own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's crucial for developing a more accurate and nuanced understanding of reality.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's hard, right?
It can be.
It can be really uncomfortable to confront ideas that contradict our own beliefs.
It can, but, discomfort is often a sign of growth.
Oh, okay.
When we're challenged, we're forced to think critically, to examine our assumptions.
Right.
To consider those alternative perspectives.
So it's not about agreeing with everything we hear. It's more about expanding our horizons.
Exactly.
Our mental horizons.
Yes, and there are practical strategies we can use to do this.
Okay, like what?
Well, for example, you could make a conscious effort to follow people on social media who hold different political or social views than your own.
Oh, God,
Or
yeah.
you could, seek out news sources that offer a variety of perspectives.
I like that. It's like diversifying your information diet.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's not just about what you consume.
Okay.
It's also about how you consume it.
How so?
This expert really emphasizes the importance of slowing down and engaging with information thoughtfully.
Okay, so that ties back to mindfulness, right?
Yes,
Being present with the information, not just like passively absorbing it.
exactly. They suggest taking the time to really understand the arguments being presented, to consider the evidence, to identify any potential biases.
And to pause before reacting.
Yes.
I'm definitely guilty of like firing off a comment on social media before I've really thought through what I'm saying.
We all do it.
Yeah.
And this expert explains that pausing before reacting allows the more rational part of our brain to catch up with our emotional response.
Oh, that's interesting.
It gives us time to choose a more thoughtful and measured response rather than just reacting impulsively. So it's like creating that space between stimulus and response.
Exactly. And that space is where clarity emerges.
Okay.
It's where we can start to see things more objectively, to separate our emotional reactions from the facts of the situation.
It's like hitting the pause button on that internal monologue that's constantly chattering away.
I love that. And it's not just about external information,
Okay.
This expert also talks about the importance of paying attention to our internal world,
Yeah.
our thoughts and feelings, and they suggest practicing self-inquiry as a way to uncover the beliefs and assumptions that might be shaping our perceptions.
So what does that look like in practice? How do we inquire into our own minds?
Well, it can be as simple as asking yourself questions.
Okay.
When you notice yourself reacting strongly to something, take a moment to ask, what's triggering this reaction in me? What beliefs or assumptions are fueling this feeling? Is this reaction based on facts, or is it colored by my emotions?
Those are good questions.
They are, and it's a skill that develops over time with practice, Right.
The more we inquire into our own minds, the more aware we become of the patterns and habits that shape our perceptions.
So it's like we're becoming detectives of our own minds,
Exactly.
uncovering the clues that reveal how we see the world.
And this expert argues that the more we understand about those internal processes, the more equipped we are to see reality clearly.
So I'm starting to see this theme, of awareness.
Right.
Like awareness of our biases, our emotions, the information we consume, even our own thoughts.
Yeah.
But knowing about this stuff, it's one thing.
It is.
Actually changing our behavior, that's harder.
You got it. And this expert doesn't just give you the diagnosis.
Right.
They give you the tools
Okay.
to help us, navigate all this and shift our perceptions.
So we've got the compass and the map now.
Yes.
How do we use them? Where do we start?
Well, that list of techniques you highlighted,
Yeah.
those are the tools.
Right, like journaling, meditation, even seeking feedback.
Exactly.
There were so many good ones. I was like, where do I even begin? There's no one size fits all.
Okay.
It's about finding what works for you,
Right.
the practices that resonate, and incorporating them into your life.
So maybe pick one thing
Yeah,
and really focus on that.
like an experiment.
Yeah, a mindfulness experiment.
Exactly. And you mentioned meditation being something.
Oh, yeah. It's always intrigued me.
Okay,
I've
good.
tried those apps, and I get distracted or feel like I'm doing it wrong.
Well, this expert addresses that,
Right.
The biggest misconception is that it's about emptying your mind.
Yeah.
That's not the goal.
Okay.
It's about observing your thoughts without judgment, noticing them come and go.
Okay. That makes me feel better because my mind is
Huh?
definitely not empty.
Right, like a popcorn machine.
Yeah, exactly.
That's totally normal.
Okay.
Meditation is bringing your attention back over and over.
To the present moment.
Exactly.
So it's like training your brain.
Like going to the gym for your mind.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So let's say 5 minutes a day for a week.
Oh.
What kind of impact could that have?
Well, research suggests it can improve focus, reduce stress, increase emotional regulation,
Okay.
all of which helps with clearer thinking.
Makes sense when I'm stressed.
Yeah,
My thoughts are all over the place.
exactly. And they say meditation isn't just sitting on a cushion.
Okay.
It is cultivating mindfulness in any activity.
So walking, eating,
Yes,
doing the dishes.
even dishes.
Okay, so it's more like
A way of life
a way to be in the world.
with more presence.
Exactly. It's less intimidating now.
Good.
It feels more accessible.
It is a journey, not a destination.
Right.
There will be days, your mind's a runaway train.
Yeah.
Just keep practicing. Bring your attention back
Okay.
with kindness.
I'm feeling inspired, I have to say.
That's great.
And it's fascinating how all these tools, mindfulness, self-inquiry, diverse perspectives, slowing down meditation, they all point to the same thing.
What's that?
Creating space. Space between stimulus and response space, to reflect space, to question space, to connect
Right.
more authentically with ourselves and the world.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
And in that space, that's where the clarity comes in.
I think so.
It's like stepping back from all the noise.
To see with fresh eyes.
So to everyone listening, if you're feeling overwhelmed by the world,
Yes.
if you want more clarity, more peace,
Remember,
it all starts with creating space.
space to breathe, space to think, space to be.
And as you create that space,
Yeah.
you might be surprised by what you find
Absolutely.
about yourself, about the world,
Yeah.
about the truth within.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning.
And keep seeking.